All right. We're not done one of these in a while, so let's see how this goes. Um, in the old fashion of doing these, I'd literally just take questions and I'll do my best to try and answer them as and when the questions come in. So please feel free to use the chat. And also, please let me know, can you hear me clearly? Because the last time I did a live, someone said to me that my mic was popping. I can't hear that. So if you can hear me clearly without any popping, can you put a one in the chat? That would be absolutely amazing. Just so I know, and if there's anything that I need to fix here. But yeah, can hear you clearly. Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right. So, like I said, we've not done one of these in a while. I used to do this regularly on a Sunday evening where we'd get together for like an hour, maybe 2 hours, and just fire through questions. And I'll try and answer as many of your questions as possible. I think maybe do that this evening. Have a little chat, try and answer some questions. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, and I've been covering a lot of the stuff that would be coming down the track in about 17 days' time. And we don't know what that is going to look like concretely until the day rolls along. I'll be covering a lot of the announcements as and when they happen and providing some thoughts in the days that follow that. But I think for now, whilst I have been covering that topic and those subjects because they're pertinent, they're relevant. We've also had a lot of new people actually join the channel as well, new subscribers. And for those of you who have been with me for a while, you know that we do Q&As. But for maybe if you're new, you probably weren't aware, and maybe I might try to get back to this. It's just time intensive though. So how it works is, and there's already a question in there already, which I'll come to in a minute. Conflictus. Pop a question in the chat. It could be anything that you ask me. But generally speaking, most people would ask me about investing, mortgages, interest rates, economic views, those types of things, personal finance, those types of things. If you want to ask anything else, that's also fine. Feel free to do so. Yeah, we'll give this as long as it takes. I'm aiming for. What time is England playing today, by the way? Have they already played? Are they playing right now? Because I have no idea. Like, time has just disappeared today, so I have no idea. I know they're playing Finland, but that's all I know. So what time are they playing? Please let me know in the chat, because if I do have time to watch it a little bit later on, if we're not on here, then I absolutely will try to watch it. Right, let me just arrange my peripheries here properly. 1 second. Should have done this before coming live, but here we are. Okay. Conflictus. Let's have a look at your question right here. What are you saying? My question of the day is global FTSE or world or the S&P 500? All right. Really good question. I did a whole topic on this on a Vanguard Made Easy workshop a couple of Sundays ago. This was actually one of the things that we talked about in there. So I think it's important to understand the type of vehicle that you're going into. S&P 500, America's 500 largest companies, right? They're all household names, producing products, providing services that we all need and use in society on a day-to-day basis. Pretty large companies, all of them large cap. And among them will be some of the huge companies that have done so well this year: NVIDIA, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They're all in there, right? But the S&P 500 are American companies. So that's worthwhile noting, which means that from an investment theory point of view, you have concentration risk because all of your money is pretty much in America and the American economy, albeit those companies are multinationals, they trade internationally, but they're still American companies. So they'll be subject to economic downturn in the States, any regulatory legislation changes in the States, arguably also in other areas where they also trade, but predominantly in the States will have an impact on them. Now, when you look at the FTSE All World, the FTSE All World will include large cap, mid cap, probably small cap as well, but across different jurisdictions. So that will include America. It will include Europe, UK, Asia, emerging markets, China, Japan. You're getting more of a global approach here, okay? And naturally, because it is an all-world fund, you're also going to have access to the S&P 500 companies in there. So, and this is what I don't think a lot of people realize, that when you go for a FTSE all-world or a globally invested ETF or index fund, they will naturally include all of the S&P 500 companies. So you're getting the benefit of the S&P 500 companies anyway in an all world. Plus, you're also able to diversify your investment risk away from just American companies to other global territories and other global uh, countries and their various sectors within that. And I think that's one of the key things to remember when you're trying to pick the S&P 500 or the FTSE All World. I can't and I don't ever tell you, yeah, go for the All World or the S&P 500. That will be advice. I don't know your personal circumstances. What I try to do with all of these is just give you a few things to think about, the train of thought from someone who might be sat there looking at, right, how do I build this portfolio? And that comes from my years being a financial advisor, also sitting in on, investment committee meetings where we talk about these types of things. So hopefully that was helpful. Good question here. FTSE 100 stocks value or value trap? Depends how you look at it. I think many investors will argue that there's value in the UK right now. When they say value in terms of the opportunity, that actually the stocks are pretty well. The FTSE 100 has held up surprisingly well, to be honest. But when you compare it to like other economies, other markets, it's not really done well at all. It's probably an underperformer in the wider context of things. So people would say that actually maybe there's a little bit of value in the UK purely because, well, there is a possibility, a real possibility that if we get our growth right, our economic plan right, then those FTSE 100 companies have the ability, even the 250, for example, have the ability to really go on a run if we get the environment, the circumstances, the water around them right. If we can get the economy growing, they could possibly be good. But are they a trap? Possibly. It depends how you look at it. It depends on whether you are bullish or whether you're bearish. And I think there is justification for both of those views. It really depends on what side of the eye you sit on. I think as a diversification tool, though, probably not a bad shout. You can have a little bit of money in it, and if it does well, it does well. But you're never really going to know, because that's the whole point of investing, right? You try and take an educated guess on what's going on. I would say that we do have significant challenges, though, for sure, in the UK as the economy, and we need to get the economic picture right for sure. And this is why, covering everything that's happening in the budget, all of this ties to this question, right? What about the UK economy? If Labour cannot get the economy growing, we're going to see that reflected in the FTSE 100. If they get things wrong, we're going to see it reflected in FTSE 100. So it's a difficult one to answer. It really depends on what side of the aisle you're on. So James is asking, do you think any changes to pensions will be dated to October 31st or will affect the next tax year? It's hard to plan with this uncertainty. I'd be very, very surprised if any changes they make are kind of immediate. They will probably take effect from the new tax year, April the 6th, 2025, or if they need to be signed off in the House of Commons or the House of Lords later on. So they'll announce them and then they'll start the work to try and get it signed off, so they actually becomes something that from a legal point of view is then bought in. I don't think the changes will be, I can't see any changes happening and being dated October 30th. Not at all. Most of them will come in a new tax year or during whatever period it takes for them to get it all signed off, so it's all official in government. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about anything being effective immediately. But then again, I could be wrong, but I don't think that they would. How do you see the American election affecting investments? Interesting question. It's so finely poised. I mean, I was tracking it and following it quite closely up until about 3 weeks ago, and I've just been really, really busy. I've not been paying attention to it. But the momentum has really swung Kamala's way. And you could tell that by the donor money that she got very, very early on. And I've not really been tracking what Trump has been doing. But I think it's safe to say that most people will say that Trump will be good for the markets. I don't know how close the polls are right now. I would imagine they're still pretty close. So it's on a knife edge. Who's going to win? Would it be the end of the world if Kamala wins and the Democrats have another term? I don't think so, because even when you look at their recent unemployment numbers, fucking unemployment numbers are pretty good. They're really, really, really good. And so I think they're already coming from a good place as it is. Will they rally? If you think about what Trump potentially means, he's a little unpredictable. So maybe there may be a little bit of, okay, what is he going to do? What is he going to do to start off with? Well, I think if the Democrats win another kind of like term, it's a continuation of what has already been. And if the numbers, I mean, they've got inflation down under control at the moment. I mean, Jeremy Powell's done a pretty good job there. Maybe a little bit slower than some people would have hoped, that he would have taken his time with rate cuts, but they feel like they've got that under control at the moment. Will they take a leading kind of view in terms of what's going on in the Middle East right now? Joe Biden has been pretty weak, to be honest. Would Trump appease or escalate? I don't know. So it's really difficult to tell, to be able to know for sure. But generally speaking, people will say that Trump will be better for the markets. But then again, if the Democrats win, it's a continuation of what is already happening, and the economy's doing all right when you think about it in the scheme of things. So we're just gonna have to wait and see, mate, because it's a really, really tough one to call. It really is. Like, he could win, he could not win, and if he doesn't win, what then happens? I honestly could not tell you, mate. It's just one that we need to watch. I imagine. There's a question about merging stocks. Are they a buy or a sell? I'm not going to answer that because that will be advice. I will not give any direct answers that will mean that you basically go and take what I say and go and act on it. If you're asking for like a black and white, it's very, very hard for me to answer that and provide you context. That feels like you're looking for a definitive yes or no. I mean, at the end of the day, from a global point of view, if you look at countries like Japan, which would be classed as emerging markets, they had a phenomenal year. If you look back over 2022, heading into 2023, phenomenal year. Does that mean that they're a buy now or a sell now? Not necessarily. It depends what's going on in that market at any given time. So the answer to that question is really based on what's going on, what the outlook is, what's going on in their local economies and that global view. There's so much that goes into it than just buy or sell. We don't do stock picking or calls or anything like that on the channel, like of any nature on this channel. Someone's saying it's really kicked off at 5. What's the score, by the way? And it's Harry Kane playing because I was hearing on the radio today that he's actually back. Oh, they won 3-1. Oh, fantastic. I'll tell you what, he needed that, by the way, because it was a car crash of an interview the other. Oh my God. I was in the car coming back from London, listening to the commentary. And I looked at the highlights and it was an absolute mess. I mean, what was Jordan Pickford doing that first half? It was it was an absolute joke. And then his comments at the end, mate, like, you're not ready for this stuff. I don't think he received a lot of media training, so that's good news. 3-1 win. I'll definitely watch the highlights. Indian rupees crashes at all-time low in recent years. Do you think global recession is already in effect, and how can we hedge against market risks? Do I think global recession is already in effect? I personally don't think so. Not just yet. I mean, it's entirely plausible that once you start, I mean, depending on what happens in the Middle East, if that escalates beyond an element of control, I mean, look, we've already, been hearing and seeing headlines and the fact that oil prices right now, despite what's happening in the Middle East, haven't really taken a bit of a spike at all. I think if things escalate there, things can get a whole lot worse. I mean, are we in a recession in the UK? Not really. Is America in a recession? No, not really. If you want to look at the largest economy in the world, are they in recession? The States? No, they're not. So I don't think a global recession is in effect in any way, shape, or form. I think countries individually in their little micro economies, you could argue that yes, some countries will be in a recession, and that's just the way of things. But if you look at it from a global point of view, the market that matters is the States. That's the market that really, really matters. And at this point in time, I don't think anyone would say that the US is in recession in any way, shape, or form. I mean, they like I said, their employment numbers last count were freaking awesome. They were really, really good. So yeah, I don't think so at this point. I see the stocks and shares ISA are now allowing fractional shares again. You know what? I was supposed to do a video for this, completely forgot. Yes, there is clarification on that. Look, let's be honest, mate. If they had used whatever obscure piece of legislation that ended up being that they quoted that was dating back to like 1980 something, I think it was 1988, just to deprive um, first time investors of buying fractional shares. And when you start looking at what the repercussions would have been, not just for like first time buyers and first time investors holding fractional shares within an ISA, there would have been considerable impacts for all of the platforms that allowed you to buy fractional shares. I don't think they had the appetite for whatever they would have to do to compensate, because all of the providers, Invest in Trading 212, Free Trade, all of them, Moneybox, all of them would have had a consultation with the government to say, look, this is what we want to do. Can you sign it off? And they would have got approval. So if they then turned and said, no, we're not going to allow this, and it meant that the companies had to fork out of their own pocket because they found this obscure law from 1988, which meant that, no, you can't have fractional shares. I don't think they had the appetite for that. And I'm glad that they've just kind of been like, okay, look, we're just going to allow it, because it should have always been allowed anyway, regardless of whether or not, some piece of legislation before fractional shares were a thing says that you can't have them in there and they don't qualify, which is an absolute joke, mate. But it just goes to show how desperate they are in terms of trying to generate money in via tax revenues. We're in a pretty dire strait, so I'm happy that they're allowing them in. I'm approaching retirement. I have a DB pension, SIP, and ISA. Fantastic. What percentage would you recommend for high risk, i.e. VWRL, VTI, happy to leave the rest in a 60-40 split? How old are you? I don't know how old you are, so it's hard for me to answer that question. Look, the thing that you need to remember is, the VWRL and the VTI, as you just mentioned there, they are all 100% equity exposures. So as an ETF and an index fund, it's all equity. So you could, where you're saying 60-40 split, just take that off the table, because when you look at the VWRL, is 100% equity. You don't have a 40% split in bonds. So you could argue maybe that could be too high a risk for you. But I don't know that unless you will either take one of my assessments that helps you understand your risk appetite and your capacity for loss when investing, because there are two assessments that I do have. You'd have to take those for me to be able to give you an accurate steer and be like, okay, maybe this is kind of where you need to be thinking or want to be thinking. It's hard for me to know, because I need to know your age. I need to know how far off you are. Yeah, there's so much that goes into it. I mean, you can leave it in a 60-40 split, but which way? Are you saying 60 bonds, 40 equity, or 60 equity, 40 bonds? It really depends. And, if you do have a long way away, 60-40 may not even be the right split for you there. So it's really, really hard to know, to give you an actual answer without running you through a couple of assessments and asking you a bit more information to see where, from a investment principle point of view, what might look good for you as a consideration if you're trying to do this on your own. So yeah, it's, I hope that's helpful, but I can't give you a definitive answer because there are so many unknowns that exist. Giggers, I'm selling my home next year. I want to put as much as I can into an ISA. Can I utilize my partner's 20K allowance? If so, how would you go about that? You can't utilize your partner's ISA allowance. So it is an individual savings account. So if you sell your home, I assume you're married. If you give your wife £20,000, that money is technically hers. It's in her name. If you're married, obviously you work as a team. That's fine. So you could do that. But I really wouldn't. I mean, if you're married, then yes, absolutely. But you can't have it in joint names because it's an individual account. So again, I don't know. I'm assuming that you're married. You can do that, not a problem at all, because as a couple, and I did this on a scribe, I think last week or so, I talked about how to shield your money away from labor tax raids. I think that was the title of the video. And I talked about how ISAs work. So if you've not used your ISAs this tax year so far, and you're a couple, so there's two of you in the house, you're married, you've got £20,000 allowance that you can use for this current tax year. Then on April the 6th, 2025, you've got another £20,000. That's £40,000. Times that by two, that's 80 grand. So if you sell your home, you have 80K, you and your partner's allowances will mean that you can put 80K potentially into tax-free ISAs or tax-free environments over the next, where are we right now? October, 6-7 months, roughly. So yeah, you can, but only advisable if you're married, really, to be honest. Cheers, buddy. Thank you very much. Nice wallpaper. Thank you. And by the way, guys, if you are getting value from this, please don't forget to smash the like button. It just really helps with the YouTube algorithm. I know it sounds like weird when I ask people to do this, but the way YouTube works is that if people are on a live stream like this, one of the ways that it gauges whether or not people are either enjoying it or whether they're actually getting value from it is by, yes, engagement, but also by the likes button. So it will look at those metrics and say, well, okay, if people enjoyed it, then I'll push it to other people to actually watch as well, which means that it gets to see, other people get to see it because the reach is expanded. So yeah, if you can, that will be amazing. It only takes a second, but it really, really does help. Coming threats of American tariffs on Eurozone exports and vice versa, a risk to growth and trade relations, and hence increased risk of stagnation and stagflation. Well, look, any tariffs, if Trump imposes tariffs on exports, it is going to be inflationary to the US. Because at the end of the day, it's the companies that buy, say, these Chinese goods that the tariffs are going to be imposed upon. And if business is anything to go by, they'll pass that on to their customers. So prices will go up in America as a byproduct of those tariffs being pushed up. I mean, this whole idea that, yes, they do have a trade deficit and so on and so forth. 100%, we absolutely get it. But I feel like it's going to be inflationary to the Americans because it's American companies that will have to pay that tariffs. China's not going to pay it because, China's producing it. We're going to send it to you. It's the individual, the company, the entity that buys it that is going to pay those tariffs. So that's going to be inflationary to America. And it's going to be interesting to see if he does win, if that is something that he actually pushes through. He can talk a lot of hot air sometimes. So will he actually do it? Judging by his first term, he's properly on it. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does. But it will be inflationary to Americans. And it's going to get passed on in that way, I think. Okay, we just done that one. 1 second. Where are we? There's a good question here by Chob here. To what degree does the WF influence our government, i.e. budgets? Look, honestly, I don't know for sure because I'm not in economics, so I don't work in that economic kind of form in any way, shape, or form. It will have an impact. To what degree, though? I don't know. I mean, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories, and I don't necessarily lend myself or like to think from a conspiratorial point of view. Um, not saying it doesn't exist, not saying that there aren't, conversations that have an influence that isn't being wielded. Sure, of course there is, but I just try not to think in that way. But I can't answer this question because honestly, I don't know the answer. To be able to give you a proper thought through answer, I don't know. Are sanctions on Google and Apple a negative sign for breaking up big tech companies' monopoly? And is that a risk for passive index investing? You could, yes, possibly. But mate, listen, look, the American political system is built on lobbying. I guarantee you right now, the likes of Alphabet and Apple, Meta, all of these tech firms, trust me, they're not just going to sit there and allow the government to just break them up. Like, they'll be greasing palms, lobbying, doing all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of talk of whether they'll do it or not, but will they actually do it? I don't know. In terms of what happens from an investor's point of view, it depends on how it's done. It depends on how it's done. How are they going to break these companies up? In what capacity? If they do break them up, is it going to be broken up in the fact that it has to be sold, and sold to who? So there's a lot of unknowns in there, and it would probably have an impact on investors for sure. Of course, it will. It's a material change to a company structure, so there will be an impact. But it's hard to speculate on what that impact will actually be because it would have to happen before we actually really knew to what extent. But I just cannot see the likes of Alphabet, Apple, and all of these tech giants just sitting there without, working in the background, greasing somebody's palm, lobbying someone, or having some kind of conversation to influence the way the government is thinking about this. These are big companies, mate. Like some of them have more money than actual countries, like Apple, Nvidia, Google. Stupidly, I mean, combined wealth probably richer than the American government. That's saying something. When you talk about too big to fail, some of these lot are too big to fail, and with that, extremely hard to break up. So they'll be wielding influence all over the place. But it will be interesting to see what actually happens. I hope Labour don't destroy ISAs and pensions and make it impossible to file. I mean, look, they're going to do what they're going to do. Look, what I do think is important is I've covered a lot of this stuff. We won't know until the 30th. And even if they do make changes, people will adapt. So whether it will impact you from gaining financial independence, retiring early, I don't think it will. It might make it harder. It might take a little bit longer, but it won't. I mean, we have to control the controllables here. I mean, look, what are they going to do with pensions? What are they suggesting to do with pensions? They're suggesting on possibly doing something around the tax relief that goes in, standardizing that maybe 33%. Rachel Reeves has kind of been stepping away from that a little bit over the past week or so, just from looking at some of the headlines. They might bring pensions into inheritance tax land. So all this, you die before 75, outside of your estate, no inheritance tax, they might get rid of that. That's an easy change for them to make. Pulls more money in from a tax revenue point of view. We've already spoken about the fact that they may cap your tax-free cash from 268,000, whatever it might be, 850, I think it is, to 100,000. That will bring in more money immediately because as people try to take tax-free cash, they're going to have to pay tax on anything over the £100,000 they take. What are they going to do with ISAs? Not been a lot has been announced with ISAs, but what could they do? They could reduce the limit, the £20,000 allowance. That will be hugely unpopular, but they could do it. They would not dare, and I say that touching wood, they would not dare revoke the tax-free status of ISAs. They wouldn't dare do that. I hope not anyway. So there's not really much that they can do. The only thing they can do with pensions is they'll pull more people into paying tax. So it will make it a little bit harder, but not impossible to achieve financial dependence or to retire early. I just think it's once we know what they are, we'll know what we can do and what needs to be done in order to stay on track. But they'll for sure they may make it a little bit harder, but it won't make it impossible. I mean, look, I would not disagree with this comment. I think if Trump wins, Jesus Christ, well, let's just say if he doesn't win, I mean, if he wins, there could be trouble because he will try and I can see that he would try and dismantle elements of the government as it currently sits, and whether that would be a good thing or not, I don't know. If he doesn't win, there's also the risk of what will happen. What will happen if he doesn't win? Like the rhetoric that's being put out there at the moment. I mean, we talk about Elon Musk, and as genius as that guy is, he's just turned into a bit of a villain. And the things that have been happening with Tesla this week and SpaceX this week, amazing. But when you hear him saying things like, this will be the last election if we don't win, that isn't good. That's not good at all. So yeah, it could quite literally hit the fan if he doesn't win, but who knows? Given that NHS is one of the biggest employers in the UK and undoubtedly a slice of your viewer demographic, have you considered doing a video on how the NHS pension works? No, I haven't. And the reason for that is because the NHS pension is extremely complicated depending on what you have in there. And I've not been able to find definitive information on anything at all on that. So whilst the NHS pension is 100% there, a lot of the times what I focus on is, private pension, SIPs, those kind of things. Because for most people, having something separate as a secondary pension tends to get a little bit more traction as well online, not necessarily the NHS pension. Yeah. Do you agree that the role of ESG diminishing in the future? Apparently, COP isn't going to be that well attended this year. The world has changed, mate. So if you think about what ESG was all about before, it was all about the environmental, social, and governance, right? So the world has changed from then. And I like I said, I used to sit in an investment house. I used to work in an investment house. I used to sit in investment committee meetings. And ESG was very much like, okay, cool. Is it doing good for the world? But the argument that I heard recently, being sat down with someone who sits in the investment world still, is when you think about what's happened with the cost of living crisis over the past couple of years. Russia attacking and invading Ukraine, oil prices shooting up. That isn't necessarily ESG either in terms of its impact on people's well-being. So there is now a different lens over ESG investing, in the fact that it's not just about, yes, having that ethical, environmental kind of like social governance, feel good theme to it. It's actually more granular now. How do we make sure that people aren't in a position where they feel financially under pressure, and because of something that we can't control, people are placed under financial strain where their standard of living is significantly reduced, and people then fall into food poverty, fuel poverty, energy poverty. I think there is that lens over it now, and I think it's going to take a little bit of a rethink over the next few years. This whole idea that we need to move towards green energy. Well, what does that mean in terms of where do we get the energy from right now? Because the transition to green energy is it's a long journey. So we can't just stop and transition in a moment's notice. It's going to take some time. And so whilst that transition is happening, there is still this need for energy independence away from the likes of Russia and some of the other players that are on the global market, which means that for some countries, America, maybe even us here in the UK, it may mean that we need to turn on the taps again in terms of our energy generation. So it's going to take a bit of a rethink, and it is going through a bit of a rethink right now for sure because of what's happened over the past 2-3 years. But yeah, who knows? Do you think the UK will be able to drive any significant growth over the next 5 years? Hard to look past the stagflation of the recent past. Mate, this is all going to come down to how the economic policy comes to the forefront. The big problem that Rachel Reeves has right now is she's saying she wants to grow the economy. But if, for example, she makes employers pay more on national contributions tax for pension contributions, that's directly counterintuitive to what she's saying she wants to do. It just is. If she does anything that impacts businesses' ability to invest, it's not going to be good. So it all depends what this government does from here on out. It really, really does. Do I think we'll be able to get any significant growth? What is significant growth, mate? I mean, our growth numbers are a lot. What, 1, 2%? If that a year, is that significant? I don't know, mate. I don't know. I'm not. I'm not very bullish right now. If I'm honest, I'm just not. I'm just not bullish at all. And maybe it's because I make videos and I do read the comment section, and it just feels like everyone is kind of like fed up. And I'm seeing it in my friendship group as well. I work for myself. I run my own business. I speak to a lot of people who run their own business who have, who are in similar situations to me. And mate, if you're going to put the squeeze on people like working class people, business, small businesses, like it's going to be hard, mate. It's going to be really, really hard. And people are saying, actually, you know what? I'm going to get up and leave. I'm almost like that at the moment, if I'm completely honest. I'm like, you know what? I've got opportunities and there are opportunities elsewhere. I'm off. I'm gone. So who knows? Who knows? It really depends, mate, what the government and the policies end up being. My opinion about BRICS and de-dollarization. What kind of effect will that have on the world? Will things change with Trump? And do you think that influence of the US to the world? Look, look, there is no doubt that the dollar has been losing its I don't want to say it's power. Is power the right phrase? Is dominance, I would say, for sure. It has been losing its dominance. But if we see a full de-dollarization, that is a huge, huge problem for the States. It's massive. And the global implications will be huge, will be absolutely unthinkable. So it's kind of like a slow burn right now. And, the BRICS nations, which have been the laughing stock for the last 10 years or so, they're gonna sit up and take notice now. They really, really are. They really, really are. And it was interesting seeing Saudi Arabia join them at the beginning of this year. And then this announcement that actually, you know what, we're probably going to be accepting payments for oil now in rupees or yen. It's mad. Absolutely mad. The impact is going to be catastrophic if it does happen. And it's one of the reasons why America has to win the AI battle. They have to. They have to win the AI battle. And that looks like they have to control chip supply. So the two biggest players in this, Taiwan Semiconductors, all of this talk about China trying to get Taiwan back into its territories and Americans saying, we will fight. That's why. Taiwan Semiconductors, massive player. NVIDIA, massive player, although NVIDIA is an American company. They have to win the AI battle. They have to. Because if they don't, that with de-dollarization, huge, huge risk. I mean, I don't know what it would physically look like, but I think it's safe to say when you start looking at, Ray Dalio did a video. I did a video maybe like a year and a bit ago talking about the rise and falls of empires, and I used Ray Dalio's kind of take on it. And when you look at America, all powers in the world have like a bell curve, right? So you have it go up and you have it go down. America is on the precipice of the decline. You can just see in everything that's happening. It's undeniable. Go watch that video by Ray Dalio. Really, really interesting. But yeah, I don't know what it would look like physically, but I can tell you right now, even if Trump were to get in, this is the main thing that Trump is really chomping at the bit at. And he's spoken about it a couple of times about the de-dollarization. They can't let it happen. They can't let that happen, but they also can't let any other country win the AI battle. They just can't. But whether Trump is going to actually be able to do anything about the de-dollarization, I don't know. I don't know. I think internationally, people are tired of America picking and choosing how they influence geopolitics. You want to be the cop who runs and tells people what to do, but when there are blatant conflicts in values, you do what would otherwise be regarded as a crime or corrupt. But because, oh no, this suits our agenda better, they'll turn a blind eye. And I think we see that now more than ever. The hypocrisy behind the wars that they fought, the real reasons come into light behind the wars that they fought, how they've caused most of the major conflicts or been behind most of the major conflicts. I think countries are tired of that. And the countries that are tired of that now are the ones who are in BRICS saying, actually, you know what, we need to shift the global map of influence away from the States. And that terrifies them. And I think to a certain extent, it terrifies the Western world. I don't know. What do you think? That's just my thought on it. What do you think? Hi, my only assets is my home, no savings or portfolio. I want to move from UK to Portugal. When would be the best time? Tomorrow? Yesterday? It's hard to know. I think if you're thinking about moving, you need to think about what that looks like for your own personal timeline. And like timelines are really, really key. I talk about timelines in my book. It's one of the first things I open up the book with, your timeline. You know, if you sit down and you draw a straight line and you say, right, well, this line, this is now, this is the future. You say 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, or whatever period of time you want. What are the things you want to happen on that timeline and what's most important? And I think when people go back to that as a simple exercise, what you need to do becomes more apparent. And so, yeah, I couldn't tell you when would be the best time. That's going to be very much like your personal decision and call to make when you think is going to be the best time for you to move. But yeah, I think there are lots of considerations there. If you haven't got any savings or even got any investment portfolio and your asset your home is the only asset you have, then obviously if you're going to be selling an asset to move or renting out that asset to move, you know, the value on what you can generate from that asset is going to be really important. And this is assuming that you have no mortgage on that thing as well. So there are lots of factors that need to be considered in that from a practical point of view. So just think about, you know, how much is it going to cost for you to live in Portugal? You know, what's that sum of money that you need to have? Can your home as an asset sustain that over the long term or the short term? These are all questions that need to be asked. But if you put things on timeline, the timeline will tell you and give you what should be the priority to pay attention to. Like, it's really, really important. And like I said, you know, my book is called The Money Basics: How to Become Your Own Financial Hero. I open up the book talking about your finance will, your will of life, and then your timeline. The combination of those three exercises. When I was advising, we would do a variation of that. We would definitely do the timeline exercise, though, because it puts everything into perspective. It also gets you to think outside the box. This is what I want to happen. So what are the risks that could prevent me from making that thing happen? What do I have going in my favor to make that happen? What do I need to do? That allows you to really provide focus and narrow in on what your goals are, because once you know where you want to go, the things you need to do become more apparent. Someone's asking there, how do I get rich? Mate, listen, if that was an easy question to answer, we would all be billionaires and trillionaires. I mean, look, unless you're born into a rich family or you're able to win the lottery or, I don't know, come up with some kind of invention that makes you Elon Musk overnight, I have no idea. I wouldn't say, well, would I say that I'm rich? I'm definitely rich in comparison to where I come from. But rich is relative, mate. It's relative to different people. To some people, I'll be fabulously rich from where I've come from. To other people, if I'm in my group of friends who are all very, very well off and work, I used to do music. So if I'm in my group of friends where they're producers and they've had number one hits all over the place, like I'm not rich next to them, I'm broke next to them. It's all relative. But at the end of the day, it is really just about what it means to you. What does rich mean to you? And that's always the biggest question. What does rich mean to you? Because for some people, it's like, I just want to have like 50 grand in the bank. For some people, it's like, I need 2 million in the bank. And I'm like, okay, but what's the difference between 50,000 and 2 million? What is the core difference in terms of what it would mean for you and why? Why 50K? Why 2 mil or 1 mil? Why? And when you ask people that question, oftentimes they can't answer it. Is it 2 mil because, okay, I want to be in a position where I want to be able to do X, Y, Z, or this £2 million will enable me to do X, Y, Z. You need to be really, really clear on that. So, but I can't give you a straight answer, mate. Like, it's tough, man. Money does not grow on trees. But if you find something you love, you have the ability to increase your income. It is then all about what you do with the income once you earn it. I think a lot of people these days will get caught in this cycle where, yeah, you work hard. Yes, you do really well. You earn a lot of money, but you go and spunk all that money up the wall. And then what's the point? What's the point in earning 10 grand a month, 15 grand a month, 7 grand a month if you spend it all and you're broke? Like, literally, the person who earns £2,000 a month and is broke on payday is the same as the person who earns £10,000 a month and is broke on payday. The only difference is one person is earning more and spending more, which is where the waste is. Because the person earning 2,000, if you could go from earning 2,000 a month to 10,000 a month, and you kept your expenses the same as you were at when you were at £2,000 a month, I would argue you're rich, or you're on the road to being rich and being financially stable. The problem is, people earn £2,000 a month. It's tight here. They earn £10,000, and I can speak about this from experience. So I'm like, oh, once I get to this earning, I'm going to be happy. No, you're not, because guess what? When you start earning 10,000, you go to start shopping at nicer places, wearing more expensive things. You want to buy a nicer car. You want to go to nicer restaurants. You want to do all of this flashy, blingy stuff. That means that now you're on £2,000. We're spending £2,000 a month, but you're now here, and now all of a sudden your expenditure has now matched your 10 grand. So you're still broke, but you're just doing nicer things. But you're still broke. You still have zero to work with, zero to build any financial security with. This is what I think people don't quite understand. Before you get to a position of being financially free or financially independent, you need to become financially stable. But people don't want to do the work to be financially stable because they want to get to financial freedom and jump that step. You can't be free if you can't get yourself stable. Fundamental things that are so, and I've learned all of that the hard way. All of it the hard way. I talk about it in my book. I practice what I preach. I do everything that I talk about in my book. It's what's made me kind of get to a position where now I am financially stable. I do have an element of financial freedom because at the end of the day, I don't have any debts. I've got a little mortgage on this house. That's it. I have zero debts. I haven't got a drain on my income for credit cards and overdrafts and all this kind of stuff. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, really, to be honest, within reason. I haven't got £1 million in the bank, but I don't really necessarily need £1 million in the bank. It all depends on how you cut your cloth according to what you have available to you and according to things that you want to do. But you cannot get to financial freedom if you can't get financial stability. And people want to skip financial stability to go there. They find themselves there, and it's like, well, it doesn't work. More info. I'm 62, retiring at the end of the year, SIP and ISA, 60-40 split. Retiring at the end of the year, 60-40 split, stocks and bonds. However, I would like to have some in a higher risk fund. Okay. Again, I can't give you advice here. I'm now thinking about this like I used to be a financial advisor, so I'm thinking about this from a planning point of view, from a financial advice perspective. I'm going to give you what my train of thought will be. So the first thing is you're 62, you're retiring at the end of this year. You've got a 60-40, so 60 stocks, 40 in bonds. So kind of like middle of the road investment, balanced investment. Okay. The question I'll be asking you is how much do you have in your pot right now? Because that is an important number. Have you worked out how much you actually need month to month when you retire at the end of the year? And have you done the calculation as to whether or not what you already have in your pension pot is going to generate you that income? Or do you need to work 2 or 3 times a week? Do you need to pick up some hours each week? Those are the immediate questions firing off in my head. The next thing is, well, if you want some money in a high risk VWRL or VTI, working over the next 10 years, are you making that decision with the understanding that you're still going to need to draw an income from that money during the course of that 10 years because it has to fund your retirement? You're no longer in the accumulation phase. You should be in the decumulation phase now where you're taking an income from it. And with that in mind, the risk that you would take should come down. And the reason why it should come down is because you don't want to invest in the VWRL. And whilst the market is doing great, fantastic, but actually if the markets do really, really badly, oh my God, you have to then worry about the value of your pension pot, right? So there are multiple things happening and working for you and against you in that equation where you're still wanting to invest at a higher risk. There is also the question of, okay, so look, depending on how much you've accumulated across various pension pots during your working career, is it appropriate, once you've worked out how much income you need per month, how much income you need per year, to figure out whether or not something like an annuity is appropriate for you to guarantee an element of your income in lieu of the state pension kicking in, which I would think for you wouldn't be too far off now. You'll either be at 65 or 66. So what does that look like? So what you really need to be doing here is you need to be thinking about your income map. When does state pension kick in? How much do you need? What's that period of time before the state pension kicks in? What are the pots you have available to you? And how can you draw income so that you have enough until when the state pension kicks in? Hopefully you got the full state pension that will release some of the pressure. And then when you start talking about investing, so the VWRL high risk, you can take into consideration, okay, we've got state pension now kicking in after maybe 5 years. Is that level of risk still appropriate? There are lots of moving parts here, and it's not something I can just give you a straight answer to, because when I was advising, we would sit down with people and really try and map this out. We would do something called cash flow modeling. And all that basically is we'll put it into a model and say, right, you have this much. This is the income that you need to generate. What would it look like if the market did a 5%, 6%, 7%, or a -2 or 3% over the course of 15, 20 years? So your life expectancy is probably going to be somewhere in the mid 70s, 80s, right? So you probably need the money for 15, 20 years at least. So in this cash flow modeling thing, we'll be looking at all of the scenarios. What have you got? When does state pension kick in? What happens if the market does this? What if the market does that? How much money do you need to draw? What does the actual model look like in terms of, do you have enough money to really do this properly? And what choices then come off the back of that? So there's lots to think about there. And I've explained it in that way so that you can see how a planner would approach it. So again, state pension, when are you going to get it? How much are you going to get? What have you got in the pensions? What's the value? What's your monthly, yearly income requirement? Do you have enough? If not, what does that mean? All of those are the questions that perhaps are worthwhile digging into a little bit more when you try and approach this on your own. because I think if you're going to go into WVI, oh, that's great, but you just want to make sure that you're not overextended on the risk. Bear me 1 second, guys. Okay, I'm just trying to see where I am in terms of all the comments. Okay, I'm there at the moment. Um, I'm also conscious on time as well. So I think I'm going to see if I can grab maybe 3 or 4 more comments. There's a question here about rent controls in London. I think rent controls are needed for sure. But there is also, I mean, I was going to make a video. I'm looking at a video right now around Airbnb because apparently there are 20% of the rental stock in London is all Airbnb, which is great. I mean, Airbnb is fantastic. I use Airbnb sometimes, but like when you have quite a lot of the rental stock or the service accommodation stock um, going short-term lets, that's going to increase rent prices for people who need to live in London. So I think to a certain extent, rent controls are needed, but at the same time, it's already difficult enough for landlords. It's really, really difficult for landlords at the moment. So where's the balance between what's right for the landlord, where are the rights for the landlord, and where are the rights for the renters? There needs to be a middle ground, and I don't know whether or not they're going to be able to strike that balance fairly. Someone's going to have to, I'm not going to say get their pants pulled down, but someone's going to have to concede to unfavorable terms, I would imagine. The thing that is so hard about financial planning is it's literally impossible to plan for the future because government keeps changing the rules. But you don't plan based on the rules that the government is changing. You plan based on the circumstances that you know, and then you make adjustments as you go along. So it's like right, I'm going to use a football analogy here, right? So the match midweek, we had a load of attackers on, barely any midfield. There's no structure defensively, right? And when you are financial planning, you need to have a plan of attack, and you also need to have a defensive structure as well. And you do that based on what you know there and then. And then as you play the game, you might say, well, actually, you know what? The other team's batting this way or playing this way. Maybe I need to go either on the attack a little bit more, or actually maybe we need to fall back and, consolidate our position, defend well, get ourselves, kind of like used to the temple of play, reset and attack. It's the same thing when it comes to financial planning. Nothing is set in stone. The only thing you can do is you can plan based on what you know at any given time. Most of the things that the government will change will not be retrospective changes, which means that if you've got a plan period from now for the next 5 years, and say the government did change something next year, well, you've already had 12 months of planning, which is still right, correct, and effective. You can't plan based on, well, that might change in 5 years' time. It doesn't matter. 5 years hasn't happened. You plan for the now and what you know now based on, right, I'm going to do this because I know that this is true. And you change as you go along. You adapt. That's the whole point of financial planning. It's supposed to be adaptable. And, this is a good question. Given that the US didn't really fall apart from 2017 pre-COVID, why is everyone terrified of Trump? Good question. Look, I think when you look at the kind of politics that Trump kind of like has, many people will agree and disagree here. He isn't necessarily orthodox. And I think on the world stage, he didn't really I don't feel like he made America look presidential. Many people will argue that his policies were not great. Some people will argue that they are. And this is the problem with Trump, right? It's because at the end of the day, he is so divisive in his way of thinking and how he wants to go about things. And Yeah, I mean, he's hugely controversial. I couldn't tell you the exact answer to that because I just don't know. Um, Let me just read Mau Mau 247. Thank you for this, Mau Mau. I don't really get many of these, but thank you so much. Hope you're well. I've been away from your channel for a while now. Happy to see the growth. Talk to me more about working with you one on one and what benefits you can provide when working with you. Okay, cool. So look, I don't often talk about the fact that I do one on one coaching purely because it's time. It takes time. It's probably one of the things that I enjoy the most about my job. It's one of the things that I miss about being a financial advisor. Actually working with people one on one and really trying to get into their personal finances, understanding them, understanding their goals, understanding what they want to achieve, and how I can help them put the pieces to the puzzle together so they can have a plan to move towards those goals. What I have realized over the past 3, 4 months of doing this is that oftentimes it actually goes into a lot of life coaching as well, because one thing that is abundantly clear is not everyone is clear on their life goals. And I talk about finance in relation and in pursuit of your life goals. And a lot of people don't have a clear idea what the life goal is. So there's a lot of work that I do around that specifically. Now, working with me one on one, there are a lot of people online who do kind of similar things to what I do, who say, look, you've got to book 3 or 6 sessions with me, and those sessions are £1,000. I had someone that I took a coaching call with 6 months ago. He'd gone to another person who's on YouTube, popular channel, a husband and wife team, and they quoted him £3,000 for I think it was like 9 sessions or something like that. I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't do that at all. My philosophy is you're going to have to do work. So I send you pre-work that you need to do, and I work session by session basis. And each session is 90 minutes at a very, very minimum. Sometimes it goes to 2 hours or so. But the pre-work that you do is designed to give me a bird's eye view of what you want to achieve, your finances, generally speaking, because that's what it narrows in down on. I asked you to do a timeline exercise. I've spoken about the timeline exercise on this call already, on this live already. What do your plans look like across a period of time? So my job is to dial into all of those and help you work out what needs to happen between your target date and now. What are the key steps? And then what do you need to do from a financial point of view around that? Typically, I have 1 session, maximum 2 sessions with people. Highly impactful sessions. It's cost effective that way. You know that, okay, I'm going to get instructions. This is what we're going to do. And then we have a WhatsApp group where we basically have accountability calls. You can catch up with me on a quarterly basis if you want to, twice yearly if you want to. It's really, really simple. So that's how I work on a one-to-one basis. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about really helping you get that outside perspective. Oftentimes, when you're working in something, you can't often see the wood from the trees, right? Because you're so intense, you're so in it, you're focused on it. It helps to get that outside view. And I try and make sure that I'm able to give you real actionable pointers, actionable tips, right? This is what you need to do. And this is why it needs to take precedent. And by doing the timeline exercise, all of that stuff is intentional. We also delve into a little bit of psychology, behavioral psychology. So for some people, depending on what your targets and your goals are, we'll run you through behavioral assessments to really understand your relationship with money, how you make decisions when it comes to finances. We do all that stuff. From an investment point of view, if people want to book me just for an investment, we run you through your risk appetite assessment. We also run you through your capacity for loss from the investment point of view as well. So those are, and then we also have like another behavioral assessment test that sits behind that as well to help us understand, based on when you were born, what are those inert preconceived notions that you might have sat in your subconscious about investing, because those things are important to kind of like break the barriers of. So that's how it works with me. It's on a session by session time. And you have access to me via WhatsApp for follow-up calls. If you have follow-up questions, I don't say you need to book another session with me, by the way. No, you text me or you email me and I'll respond to you on email. It's simple as that. If it's going to take me 5 minutes to answer a question you might have, there's no point in you booking another 90-minute session just so that we can sit there and sing Kumbaya. I don't do that. And, one-on-one coaching is not the largest part of my income stream. I only have a number of limited slots typically per month, but I enjoy doing it because I get to meet people and actually speak with people one-on-one. So, that's how it works. If you want to book a session with me, then in the comment section, you'll see that there's the option to have like a 45-minute session or a 90-minute session with me. Just book in, and yeah, I'll be happy to help. All right, okay. Let me take one more because I'm just mindful we've been about an hour and 5 minutes. And thank you for the attendance, by the way, because there's still like 70 of you on here still at this time. I do appreciate it. I haven't done these for a while purely because it just took time. I had my book club for a period of time as well. So with my book, I had a 6-week book club, which is basically taking people through the practical elements of the book for 6 weeks. And that kind of took precedent because I would have a cohort of like 20 maximum. So 20 people in the cohort and would meet every week, like during that 6-week period on a Sunday evening. So it just meant that me doing a Q&A like this just did not work. So there will be another cohort for the book club, but I need to make some tweaks to the whole process based on feedback from the first 3 cohorts that I've had this year. So I want to improve it so that when we do the behavioral assessments, you actually have the outputs automatically sent out to you. So yeah, that will be something else. But let me take one more question. Let's see what we've got here. I'm trying to find a good one. All right, let's have a look at this one. This is a really, really good one. What are your thoughts on the SJP Academy for someone considering a career in financial advising? The SJP Academy is actually pretty good. I know people have gone through it. I do have links with SJP because I was with SJP for a while. Really, really good. I do think, though, that there are other avenues that you can go down. So, mate, listen, if that is something you actually want to do, why don't you DM me on Instagram, drop me a message there, or just email me. Let me put my email address in the chat. Email me because I might have an alternative route for you to go down. So that's my email address, mate. Email me or message me on Instagram, and I might have an alternative route for you to go down. With the SJP Academy, yeah, you just have the time, and it's a commitment. And if they are going to put you through an academy, they're going to want a commitment from you. But you can get started beforehand. It depends whether you've done any of your exams already, whether you're doing CII or whether you're going LIBF. LIBF, it's a little bit more practical. So if you're already doing some of the qualifications, that will be a massive help, really, to be honest. But there are different routes in which you can do that. All right, but yeah, email me, mate. Thank you so much, guys. I really do appreciate you for being here and sticking with me for the last hour or so. I might do another one of these at some point. It will be great to get the likes. I'm just looking at the likes right now. We got 43 likes. It will be amazing to get those likes up to 60. So if you haven't already smashed the like button, please consider doing so. More videos this week. It's going to be really, really interesting in terms of what news comes out. I do have a couple of ideas of things that I do want to talk about. Airbnb and that rental thing is one of the things that I do want to talk about as well. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you during the week. Catch you later. Cheers.